Welcome back to the lecture series on leadership and motivation. We have been focusing on how to integrate these two important topics in business management in a practical way, in a way that you as a leader can apply the concepts and be effective more as a leader. We started out by focusing on two different roles that leaders play in organizations. First, we see that leadership is necessary to maintain a consistent level of performance established in the past. We call this role holding position. Second, we see that sometimes leadership is necessary to take new ground to obtain newer or higher levels of desired performance. Okay, back to me. We identified several characteristics that are necessary to effectively carry out these two different leadership roles that at different times are necessary to fulfill your responsibilities as a leader. And let me just emphasize at this point that as a leader, you're not in one role or the other in exclusion of the other role. It's generally a combination of the two roles. And a lot of it depends on specific followers that you have and what you're trying to get the specific follower to accomplish, and that's really the focus of this lecture series. To review, we see that holding position involves transactional leadership, and taking the mountain involves transformational leadership. Transaction leadership, or the behaviors of transactional leaders, depends on assumptions that people are primarily socially oriented and behavior is influenced by extrinsic factors. Transformational leadership behaviors depend on assumptions that people are aspirational and behavior is the result of intrinsic factors. Okay. In the first two sessions of this lecture series, we laid out this broad leadership perspective. We then introduced a behavioral model that identifies three factors that influence or contribute to behavior and its associated outcomes. And we then introduced the notion of motivation using the movie Rudy to illustrate major concepts and aspects of motivation and dispel myths that many of us have about motivation. Then in session 2, we actually looked at a model of motivation that would help you as the leader determine what is the source of the issue that is necessary for an employee to perform at the level that you want. To review, we see that holding position involves transactional leadership, and taking the mountain involves transformational leadership. Transactional leadership behaviors depends on assumptions that people are socially oriented and behavior is influenced by extrinsic factors. Transformational leadership, on the other hand, are behaviors which depend on assumptions that people are aspirational and behavior is the result of intrinsic factors. In session 3, we will investigate the application of these models. We will discuss an exercise you can go through with one of your employees to apply what we've learned through these lecture series. Okay, come back to me. First, let's review the behavioral model that identifies the three factors that influence behavior and its associated outcomes. We start with behavioral outcome. This is the result of someone's behavior. The first factor that influences behavioral outcome is skill. These are the competencies that the individual has to do the task associated with the behavior. We then identified situation facilitators or inhibitors. These are things such as policies or equipment that's available, or the working conditions, the climate and other conditions that affect the behavior of the employee at a specific time. And then thirdly, there's the notion of effort. Effort being the attentional resources that an individual puts forth toward the behavior and the outcomes associated with it. We also identified that these factors are influenced both by the individual and by aspects of the situation. To coming together, the individual and the situation, interacting with each other, then influences the motivational process, which then determines the amount of effort that's placed toward behavioral outcomes. Next, we introduced a motivational model to understand this motivational process in a bit more detail. And in session 2, we talked about the Eiv Model of Motivation. Okay. The Eiv Model of Motivation identifies 3 questions that individuals must answer affirmatively if they're going to exert effort toward the behavior and its associated outcome. First question is, can I do it? The second question is, what will I get if I perform successfully? And the third question then is it worth it? For an individual to actually exert effort toward a given behavior and its associated outcome, then they must answer yes to all 3 of these questions. Okay, back to me. So for you, the question is, how can I apply these 2 models, the behavioral model and the motivation model, to actually affect or influence behavior of a follower or a subordinate toward performance at a level higher than where we've been in the past? For instance, we all set goals for our employees and expect that employee to successfully accomplish those goals. And when those goals are asking the employee to perform at some level higher than they have in the past or to take a mountain, the question is, what can you do as a leader to fully support the employee in accomplishing those goals? So the question for you is, how to apply the learning I've seen in this lecture series so far? Or how do I go about influencing an employee's behavior in a way that I increase the chances that the desired performance is achieved by that individual? Okay, back to me. So let's look at a set of steps that we have made available for you to go through with an employee relative to a given targeted behavior or goal that you've set up for them. First, select an employee for whose performance you have responsibility and whose performance you wish to be higher than it has been in the past. After this, give this employee the survey instrument that we provided to you with this video. It's important that you explain to him or her the purpose of the survey and make it clear the specific performance target or goal that you're focusing on with this survey. Some important things to remember about this assignment is most employees perceive surveys in somewhat a threatening way because of the questions that are being asked. To decrease the threat the employee may feel from completing the survey, stress that this is a tool to help you, the leader, better focus your attention and your behaviors on helping them, the employee, achieve their goal. Stress that their answers to specific questions will remain confidential, and you will receive only a profile of analysis that will help you determine what specific actions you can take. It's important that they answer as accurately as possible. Generally, these kinds of surveys means give your first impression, your first response that comes to mind, and do not overanalyze the question. Stay here. Make sure you provide the employee with a stamped envelope addressed to the Institute so that they can mail the survey upon completion directly and confidentially to the Institute. This will help the employee sense the confidentiality and to get a feel that no one there in his or her workplace will be looking directly at their survey answers. You will receive back from the Institute a profile of the employee to aid you in your follow-up discussions with this individual. Okay, come back to me. After you have handed out the survey, picked the employee, handed out the survey, had them send it into the Institute, and receive the profile analysis back that will suggest ways which you, the leader, can act on behalf of your employee's goal achievement. you can then return back to the video lecture series here, and we will walk through the profile analysis that you will receive back from the Institute.